people developing feelings when they've been... Oh, good. Now my kids are playing the drums. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Who's going to use February as an excuse to talk about romance novels? This girl. Obviously, with Valentine's Day smack dab in the middle of February, poor little February will always be relegated to a month of talking about relationships or lamenting the fact that we're not in relationships or spending a lot of money to prove that we love people. I don't know. And also talking about romance here on BookTube. First, I read the book One True Loves. This is by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And I read this after hearing about it on the channel Gabby Reads. One True Loves is the story of Emma and her long-time relationship with her high school sweetheart, Jesse. Now, Emma and Jesse were basically made for each other. They were very much in love, and Jesse was presumed dead while out on a photography assignment. But Jesse isn't dead. But before Emma realizes or finds out that her husband is very much alive, she has time to try to rebuild her life, find happiness again, and she manages to do so with a longtime friend, Sam. Sam and Emma are newly engaged when Jesse shows back up alive, and at that point, Emma has to come to some really difficult realizations and hard decisions. This book, for me, I enjoyed it. It's not going to go down in history as my favorite read. The thing about Taylor Jenkins Reid, I mean, this book is as genuine and authentic and as easy going as The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which is one of, or the most popular title that she's written. And this book reads more like a contemporary fiction novel or general fiction novel than it does a romance novel. It's not full of the overdramatic angst. It's not full of the, trashy yet addicting smut. It reads much more, to me, in my opinion, reads much more like just a contemporary novel. One True Loves isn't the only book that I read like this month or recently. It just so happens to be probably the most mature and least angsty and most kind of emotionally affecting one. But I recommend this book very highly if you are someone who does enjoy a story centered on a romance, centered on a relationship, if you enjoy the hard-hitting emotional impacts of a romance, but aren't necessarily addicted to angst or any of the genre's typical cliches. There's one particular scene in this book that was truly affecting, where our main character stands on a rooftop for a really long time, staring out at the ocean, waiting to see if her dead husband swims back. And it's just so powerful. And Taylor Jenkins Reid, I think, has a gift for that, a gift for taking something that's very, a simple moment and making it very impactful. This book is a good example of that. Overall, I'm happy that I read it. So also dealing with a presumed dead love interest, I read a duet by Corinne Michaels, Consolation and Conviction. This is book 3 and 4 in her Salvation series. Yes, in her Salvation series. It is the story of Natalie losing her husband, Aaron, while he's on a private mission, a non-military sanctioned mission in Afghanistan. He dies, and she is 8 months pregnant at the time. Aaron's best friend, Liam, takes it upon himself to see to Natalie's well-being, to help her put the pieces of her life together. And in the process, Natalie and Liam find themselves developing feelings for one another. I'm talking about this. This is a pretty unique circumstance because this is a duet. It is a book one and a book two. And by revealing the fact that Aaron is even presumed dead, I'm sort of spoiling book one, because at the very end of book one, Aaron comes back to Natalie, and book two is then the love triangle dynamic between Aaron, Liam, and Natalie, and finding out what resolution the characters come to. And there's really no other way to discuss it with you, just by saying, you know, these are two books, but you're going to be purchasing two books. However, to get the entire story, you have to purchase those two books. Book one ends in a really intense cliffhanger. She just finds out he's alive. Like, it's odd to me. I think that Corinne Michaels made a big mistake in doing this, and I'm not sure what the rest of her books are like, what the rest of this Salvation series is like, but basically this is a gimmick, getting readers to buy two books to get one story arc that's in the middle of a series. It really infuriated me, and it made me angry. I bought both books going into it because I knew that the first book ended in a cliffhanger. That was no big shocker. It wasn't even a shocker what the cliffhanger was. But I bought two books, so I bought both books going into it. I knew I was going to read two books going into it. Both books are exactly the same length. And what makes me mad about that is that the majority of the second book is unnecessary. So not only does this fail as a duet in from my perspective, you know, too much of the story is contained in the first book, or too much of the necessary plot is contained in the first book. I mean, it's very clearly broken into two books on purpose by the author as a gimmick and as a money grab. Frankly, there's no reason that Consolation and Conviction could not have been one book. Absolutely no reason whatsoever, because they're not even particularly long books. They're 290 pages apiece, right? And romance novels tend to be on the shorter side, but I've read a lot of romance novels that are 500 pages long, and I honestly think that this story could have sufficiently and efficiently been told in 350 pages or less. I think that there is unnecessary filler in book one, and 2/3 of book two reads like an epilogue, where the resolution has already been determined. Her decision has been made, resolution, and now we're just going to find out what happens in their lives after her decision was made. I mean, that's an epilogue. I do love this trope. I love when people, you know, are thrown together either by necessity or by duty or by honor, and a relationship develops. It's one of my favorites. But I'm pretty upset with the author. Not because I don't think that she had a good story on her hands, not because I don't think that she's capable of writing well. I just feel like this was an intentional decision, and I don't see how this decision had any good intentions. Oddly enough, I read another love triangle book recently. What is going on? This one was completely on accident. I just have to say I'm not a gigantic fan of love triangle stories because I think they're dangerous. They're not dangerous. No one is in danger. But the deal with a romance novel that contains a love triangle is that automatically a reader has a 50-50 chance of not liking the book. Not every reader is going to lean in the same direction as the author intends. And so I'm always nervous that I'm going to be rooting for the one person and the other person is going to win out. And that means that I'm walking away disappointed. So It's a gamble. And honestly, had I known this was kind of like a love triangle book, would I have read it? Maybe. I was just I've been really attracted to this book since it released, because I knew that it was heavily influenced by music. The book is Drive by Kate Stewart. But the story is about Stella, who is in present day a wildly successful music podcast personality. She has a podcast where she interviews very, very famous artists. She's very successful. She started as a music journalist. When the story begins, Stella finds out that her ex-boyfriend has gotten married, and that affects her in a way that she's not expecting. She's a little bit taken aback, and so in order to process her feelings, she's going to go on a road trip. She's going to drive back home instead of getting on the flight that she already had scheduled. So while she's on this road trip, she is calling her significant other, or her significant other is trying to call her, and she's saying, I love you, I'm on my way home, I just decided to drive. So here's what we know. We know that one of Stella's exes is married now, and we know that Stella is with the other one, but we don't know which is which. And what ensues is a flashback story of Stella's early 20s, when she falls madly in love with this tortured soul musician Reid. Meanwhile, she is pursued by a more mature professional, Nate. So readers see Stella in a relationship with Reid, they see Stella in a relationship with Nate, and they sort of formulate, their opinions on which relationship they like better, which one they hope that Stella is with, and predict whether or not the outcome is what they want. Obviously, hands down, the best part of this book is the musical references for me. Music is a huge part of my life, and very, very important, as important, if not more important than books, to be quite frank. And so that was the best. It's also music of my past. Like it's the music that I feel like this book is about the music that defined me starting in the mid 90s or the early to mid 90s with the grunge and the alternative, and moving forward from there. I will tell you that I personally was not a fan of the outcome. I mean, I wasn't angry, because I think that both guys in this scenario had their own special qualities and were good, and it could have been a toss-up, but I just wished that it had gone the other way. Am I disappointed with the outcome? No, but it wasn't the outcome that it wasn't the book I would have written. That's unfair because it's not my book, it's Kate Stewart's book, but I probably would have handled it differently. I also read Dirty Letters. This is a book by Vi Keeland and Penelope Ward. These two authors collab quite frequently, although both have fairly successful individual writing careers. Dirty Letters is the story of two childhood pen pals, Luca and Griffin. Luca lives in the United States. Griffin lives in the UK. And one day, they're pen pals for years. And then one day, Luca stops returning Griffin's letters. It comes to her attention in adulthood that Griffin wrote her a very angry goodbye letter after he hadn't heard from her in so long. And she decides to reignite their letter writing relationship. They had never exchanged pictures. They were very, they had some rules to their pen pal arrangement before. And so now that they're adults, it's a little bit harder to adhere to those. They want to see what each other looks like. The problem is that Griffin is a rock star. now living in the United States. And Luca, because of a past trauma, is struggling with anxiety and agoraphobia and is not crazy about leaving the safety of her home. She doesn't like crowds. She doesn't like to be exposed. And so this is a problem. Like, how do you mix an agoraphobic with a rock star and expect that to work out? I liked this book. I thought it was cute. I really enjoyed reading about Luca's struggles with anxiety. I think that her trauma was very valid, and her having some PTSD was pretty believable, and I enjoyed that whole side of it. I do think that I would have liked to see the development of a relationship more drawn out, kind of, maybe build up some angst through some letters for a little bit longer. I mean, it was good. It just wasn't perfect. And I was a little disappointed to learn that I believe it's Penelope Ward has already written a story like this, involving pen pals. And, the best part of the book, like I said, is the representation of the PTSD, anxiety, agoraphobia, struggles of our main female character, and also the attentiveness and the understanding from the male main character, who very much took on a protective role to Luca. I mean, I think that he did everything right. I think that it was a very sweet kind of relationship. Ultimately, I'm afraid that this book is going to end up being a bit forgettable the longer and further I get away from it. I was very much anticipating Vi Keeland's new book, Inappropriate. This was written on her own. It is the story of a female newscaster named Ireland who goes on vacation and enjoys herself in a very acceptable and natural way. Only someone at her company gets their hands on a video taken while she's at a nude beach. And because of that video, she is let go from her job, with the excuse that she's not representing the media outlet very responsibly, that her behavior is quote unquote inappropriate. She's understandably upset and gets really drunk and writes the CEO a scathing letter about his policies and his company and the people in his employ who think that they can use this thing against her. And the CEO is immediately impressed, of course, because we should all be able to like drunk dial or drunk email our boss and have him think it's adorable. But because of that emailed interaction, he takes a liking to her. He makes sure she gets her job back. And then the book is sold as being a story about, at that point, another inappropriate behavior from our female character. She's going to start a relationship with the CEO of the company that she works for that is inappropriate. It could be more inappropriate than the other thing that she's already been fired for. That's the story that I thought that I was kind of getting. That's how the book was sold. But to be honest with you, there's not a lot of conflict for these characters when it comes to their relationship professionally. Like, nobody's job's in danger. Nobody's getting berated. Nobody's in trouble. That's really not what the story is about. Not necessarily a bad thing, because the story, like Vi Keeland's other stories, ends up introducing, very rich and in-depth elements of the characters' pasts, introducing endearing characters who are going through certain struggles. Like, that's what a Vi Keeland book is good for, right? Like, all of Vi Keeland's characters, while on the surface these may be fun contemporary romance novels, or they might be cute romantic comedy novels, that's just surface level for her work, as far as I found. And once you dive in underneath, there's all of these layers of real issues, like the things that our characters in books should have in their closets, right? All of their skeletons, all of their past issues and decisions and problems, and Vi Keeland writes about those and writes about characters navigating those in order to maintain a relationship. This did not disappoint. In fact, this had a very, very serious issue. Our male main character has experienced probably something that is more traumatic than any of us could imagine, and he brings that to the table. I mean, that's part of him. It comes with him into the relationship. And so, I mean, Vi Keeland's ability to take that stuff, put it in there without depressing all of us, and still giving us a couple that we're rooting for and a couple that we're happy to see together at the end of the day. That's what I like about Vi Keeland. It wasn't the book I expected. I did expect another fun, bantery office place romance with more comedy in it, but this still ended up being, I still liked this book, not as much as we shouldn't, because it does get way dark. It does get a lot darker than I expected it to, but kudos to Vi Keeland for managing to do that. There are other authors that, you know, Christina Lauren, for example. I think that Christina Lauren, the writing duo, is phenomenal at romantic comedy. When you have a Josh and Hazel, or you have an Unhoneymooners, like, it just works for them. But whenever they start to delve into some serious things, I don't think that we come back out of it as far or as happily as someone like Vi Keeland. Like, you know, she can take us all the way down. It can get really super dark in her books. Like, characters have some very bad things happen to them, or have had happen to them, that take the reader down to a very dark place, but Vi Keeland manages to bring us right back up, give us our happy ending, that, you know, we don't walk away depressed, we don't walk away sad, you know, we are super happy. So that's what I love about that author. Those are some of the romance novels that I've read most recently. Unfortunately, none of them are going to be my favorite book going forward, but none of them I couldn't stand. That little blip with Corinne Michaels, don't do that anymore. But yeah, I mean, hopefully there's something in that list that might interest you for this Valentine's Day, when I think everybody should pick up and read a good romance novel, because why not? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.